The mask mandate will be in place as Miami-Dade public schools open tomorrow.
Like Broward, Miami-Dade School Board had only one board member who voted against the mandate, and the other ones who voted for it now risk the same financial consequences as Broward.
There's Vice Chair Steve Gallen. He wrote the school protocols that began with a rule-abiding parent opt-out, which was then taken off the table before the vote. Steve Gallen, great to have you with us today.
Good morning, Glenn. Always a pleasure to be here.
Dr. Gallen, welcome. We are glad to see you. As far as we know, neither you nor anybody else at the Miami-Dade Public Schools has received that same letter that Broward got on Friday saying, if you're not in compliance, we're going to cut off your paycheck. Have you gotten that letter?
No, at this particular time, we've received no communication from the state, nothing written, nothing verbal. There's been no subsequent communication since Wednesday's vote.
So I just want to point out and pick up where we left off. Originally, the protocols that you wrote that went to a vote this week, they did have the parent opt-out without the necessity for a medical communique, which actually our viewers in Monroe should know, Florida Keys, Monroe County has a parent opt-out in place. So it is abiding, one of the only South Florida school district that is actually abiding with those state rules. So why did you and your colleagues on the board decide to eliminate that small component, leave the parent opt-out in place, and comply with the law?
I initially drafted the item, Glenna, on Thursday prior to the Friday meeting of the State Board of Education. I had an opportunity to observe and note the discourse that was taking place at the state and actually local and national levels. And I contemplated those three factors: parental choice, compliance with the law, but most importantly, the safety and welfare of our employees and our children. Subsequent to that, we had a meeting, a very compelling meeting with our medical experts. We had some additional recommendations that came in through the American Association of Pediatrics, the Florida Association of Pediatrics. And again, we had an additional opportunity to hear from the public. Those three opportunities really fueled my decision to make the recommendation, make the recommendation to amend the item. And subsequent to the public hearing of nearly 100 speakers, I made the recommendation to amend the item to remove the opt-out provision.
Yeah. Dr. Gallen, during that lengthy public hearing where many people got up, spoke for and against the mask, most of them said they do want the masks, kids in masks at school, there was a teacher from the Centner Academy, which famously had refused to wear masks early on. The teacher said essentially that putting small children in face masks at school for hours on end could affect negatively their socialization, their ability to sort of know how to get along with other kids. Now, you are an experienced educator. What's your opinion on that?
Obviously, as an adult, I don't like to wear a mask. My 8-year-old daughter does not like to wear a mask. It does provide some levels of impediment. But to conclude that it will have some short-term and long-term socialization issues, I think that was more anecdotal. And again, that's not supported by any research or any science. Listen, Michael, we've heard a number of narratives around what masking does and does not do for children and for adults. But what we do know from science, from the data that has been proven, from the research that is on the books over the past 18 months, is that masks reduce and mitigate the spread of COVID-19, which ultimately saves lives. We do know that. That is something we do know.
To your point, there is we have such difficulties having a really common sense-based discussion because of the political rhetoric that seems to be swirling every time somebody brings up masks. But I want to ask you, practically speaking, we're watching Broward and sort of predicting what will happen in Dade by what happens in Broward. Broward School started 250 some odd thousand students. A fraction of those students' families opted out. Do you have any sense of what the real numbers would be for parents to opt out of a mask mandate should they had that choice? And would it be such a small fraction that does this even matter as a policy?
Yeah, we did an analysis, and based on our preliminary analysis, it's not scientific, obviously, that number will be minuscule. We do know that, and you're absolutely correct. This has been a very loud, a very cacophonous discourse that was really undergirded by politics. So the amplification of that particular narrative makes it appear that there's widespread embracement of having a non-mask policy, but that is not the case. I will hover around 90+% of our parents support masks. The communication from our board members after the vote has been extremely positive. And again, as this issue devolved into a very politically driven issue, our board, under the leadership of our chair, Ms. Perla Tavares-Hampton, and our colleagues, we were devoid of politics, and we're nonpartisan. But as you indicate, through that 7-1 vote, we stood in solidarity for science. We stood in solidarity for what we know. We stood in solidarity for our employees and our students.
Yeah.
And we made an apolitical decision.
Yeah, Dr. Steve Gallen, let us not sort of neglect the happy part of what is going on in the Miami-Dade public schools. It is just so exciting that they are going to open tomorrow, and really for the first time in 15 months, kids are going to go to school. They'll be learning in a classroom. Are you excited about that? Are the schools ready for those kids?
Absolutely. I think you hit it on the nail, Michael. My 30+ years as an educator, the opening of schools is in my DNA, from a teacher, from a principal, from a superintendent. I have lived and breathed opening of schools, and I think this really gets our community and our children and our families back to some sense of normalcy. And let me just say this. We've had a lot of discussion about the law and compliance therewith. The 2021 legislator specifically indicated that schools should remain open, and one of the provisions outlined in that law states that we should utilize and adopt recommended strategies from federal and local agencies. So it's not about picking and choosing which laws we want to follow. It's about being able to square the laws that we have on the books and juxtapose those to a 90-day emergency order issued by the governor, and make sure that we make a decision that provides for the safety, health, and wellness of our children. So we have 3 laws that we have to square: the Constitution, which we're to operate and maintain safe schools. The legislature indicated that we're to utilize the mitigating strategies, and we have an executive order that has a lifespan of 90 days that said, "Thou shalt not wear masks in school."
Dr. Gallen, speaking of laws on the books, one of the laws on the books in the Constitution is class size. We know that 25 as a class size cap is a number that is routinely broken, and that there are all kinds of ways to get around that. And this year, the number of people in that classroom has a context that had never had before, where social distancing comes into play. I've heard from Miami-Dade teachers getting their class lists that far exceed 25 people. How are you going to keep people socially distanced and somehow meet the class size cap if you even have to? How is that going to go this year?
Oh, absolutely. And you know, I'm a straight shooter. That is a challenge. I've heard some feedback from teachers as well relative to the class rosters that they've received. We'll be in communication with the superintendent and the administration, and we also have an opportunity to reconcile class sizes throughout the week. What teachers initially get, having been a principal for 10 years, is an initial roster. We do have to deal with the students who show up and those who do not show up. But that particular process is usually worked out throughout the initial days and weeks, and we intend to comply with our class size provisions. And I'm more concerned specifically with those core areas: the English, the reading, the mathematics, those areas that really speak to accountability, and those areas that are going to be critically important if we're going to address these learning losses that we talked about over the past 18 months with our students. So that is a concern, and that is something we'll be closely following as a board, as I'm sure the superintendent will as well.
All right, Dr. Steve Gallen, always good to see you. Thanks very much, and good luck with opening school tomorrow. Hope it's a big success.
Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Glenn and Michael. You all be safe. Thank you.
Thanks.